So one of the things that we talk a lot about in the A Neighbor's Choice project is the idea of taking account of the violence that is inherent to so many of the laws in our society. And just as a basic overview, my focus with this project is simply to help people understand that we should not support in any way any law that uses the initiation of violence to stop or to create a certain type of nonviolent behavior. So that could be anything from driving with a suspended license to jaywalking, I guess, if you want to. I don't know how far they'll take those fines, but if you jaywalk, or whether it's selling drugs or using drugs or being a prostitute, or whether it's selling raw milk, or even these billionaires who don't want to comply with regulations and they're faced with criminal trials.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole lot of actions in our country. I don't know the exact figure right offhand. I've heard it's like maybe 500,000 laws that we have that that criminalize all sorts of non-violent actions. And so, go ahead.
Well, that's right. That's what we've discussed before on Facebook. Is our politics is all about making more laws. Our politicians are all about making more laws.
Right.
And of course, I didn't want to get on to Trump and Hillary, but during their debate, she mentioned that she had her signature on 400 pieces of legislation, and of course, he turned that around on her. But yeah, you're right. There's a law for everything, and our prisons are filled because of them.
Right. And so there's a couple things that happen when you make laws. At the end of the day, it goes down to you're basically hitting someone to get them to do something you want them to do.
Exactly.
And
or pulling a gun, cocking a gun, put it to their head.
Right, and that's something that we learn hopefully when we're in kindergarten, not to hit people if they don't give us what we want from them. And so whether that's someone making fun of you, or whether that's someone that doesn't want to share the toy at recess, whatever it is, the proper maturation of a child is that you come across that moment where you have to learn, keep your hands to yourself. You don't hit people to get them to comply, but somewhere along the way, that lesson is unlearned in an effective way in society as we construct these laws that criminalize all kinds of things. That yes, many of these things are not good. We don't want everybody doing drugs, but we have this addiction to using violent force to get our way over people. As opposed to, learning to bear each other's freedom, so to speak, learning to tolerate, as Paul would say, learning how to not become a stumbling block for our neighbor, so to speak.
Well, what do you think caused that from childhood to now? We've collectively accepted the fact. We vote for politicians that make these laws that criminalize us in all walks of life. What do you think caused that?
Well, that's where I think the scapegoat concept is very helpful because when we get into groups, we're much more believing in the righteousness of the things that we do. So if we have to, we have to go into if we had to go into our neighbor's house and knock on the door, and if they don't open the door and we shout enough times, we go ahead and barge the door down. And then once we barge the door down, we draw our firearm and we stick it in their face and we say, "Drop the marijuana or I'll shoot you." And if they yell back, maybe we tase them, or maybe we shoot them, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we put our knee on the back of their neck as we tackle them to the ground. I mean, if we had to actually carry out what we hire other people to do for us, if we had to carry it out ourselves, we would be confronted with the barbaric nature of what we're actually doing to people every day. But
Yes.
as long as we do it in a group, somehow we think that it magically makes it okay.
Yeah, it's acceptable in a group.
And that's what Kierkegaard said. Soren Kierkegaard said that the crowd is the untruth. It's a lie, and that's the thing that I think Jesus is trying to help us see. One of many things, but this is one of the keys kind of revelations that Jesus tries to show his followers is that be very, very skeptical of the logic of crowds, because crowds, especially when they're whipped up into a righteous sense of judgment, usually start swinging, and they don't have any qualms about it because everybody else is doing it. It's almost like the crowd possesses everybody's mind who's a part of it.
Yes, exactly.
And so, that's what I think happens at the voting booth. I think it's a ritual that,
yeah, exactly.
It's a virtual crowd. You don't necessarily see everybody, that's voting, but you do see the line as you go into the voting booth, and you do know that there's millions of people doing what you're doing right now, and they even kind of reveal what I call tells. They show the process of obfuscating violence by the very way voting is done. You go into a ballot box and there's a veil, and you hide yourself in there. So it's just like anything that's wrong. We don't want anybody to see what we're doing, do we? There's a rich tradition in America to have skepticism for involvement in wars and to have a healthy distrust of a strong central government.
Yeah.
And I think there's various reasons why people get to that they get to that conclusion, but the one that I think Jesus helps us see is that when you have large systems in which you have a monopoly of the use of violence, like a federal government, and then you give them carte blanche power to criminalize whatever the majority wants to criminalize if they get enough emotional appeal behind them. At that point, you don't really have a system of laws anymore. You have basically what I would call consecrated chaos.
Yeah, a system of feelings.
Yeah, and so and that's what I've tried to communicate to evangelical, more conservative Christians, is you may not be comfortable with letting all of the drug users free to use drugs. That may be unsettling to you. But once we see the principle of using violence to stop a nonviolent act that we find disgusting, once we see that principle on one act, we have opened up the paradigm for the government to do so for another act, such as forcing people to bake a cake for a marriage arrangement that they don't agree with, or
exactly,
or criminalizing certain speech so that churches who have certain views may be considered hate speech groups and liable for violent seizure of their property and or fines and jail time. So once you see the principle on one nonviolent act, you open the door for any nonviolent act. That's just the way that any organization operates. You have seeded the ethical principle with one, and that's why there are groups. There's a lot of groups, and this is what I think A Neighbor's Choice will be unique in, is that there's a lot of groups who they'll focus on maybe drug reform. Let's clean up the drug war. Let's not be so harsh. But they won't connect it to let's say prostitution laws. Or then you'll have another group that will say, let's decriminalize prostitution, but they won't connect it to drugs. Or you might be lucky and find a group who says, let's decriminalize both, but they don't deal with the nanny state of all the economic regulations that business owners have to face all the time, which are basically forced down their throats through the barrel of a gun. And so what I hope to do, and what this whole project is trying to get the conversation started is the principle is one, and it applies to all of those categories, including the war, including our overseas activities. If you cannot hit somebody who's not doing anything violent, if you can't hit somebody here at home because they use drugs, you can't hit a country because you're scared of them if they haven't struck you first. The principle is the same whether we're talking about wars or vices here at home in our neighborhoods. A lot of it is based on false accusations that demonize some other country and make us feel righteous to attack them before they've attacked us.
But for the masses to believe that our freedom is at risk, to me, is a lie.
Yeah, and that's I am amazed that the public gets so adamant against whatever flavor of the month boogeyman the media tells them to get angry at. And
exactly.
like with Trump supporters, they're always talking about we got to worry about Iran. They can't be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. And, what a lot of these people don't understand is the day after 9/11, there was 1 million Iranians in the streets with a candlelight vigil in honor and solidarity with the American people. They don't know that. The Fox News, average Fox News, nobody knows that.
Yeah.
Because the media doesn't show them, and probably if the media showed them, they still might not want to look at it because they don't want to see the hard truth that the enemy is not so black and white. The Iranian population is, I think, 70% of it is under the age of 40 or under. So it's a very young population, and they have very pro-Western views. And so what I've always tried to show people with the Iran issue, which has been a perpetual boogeyman for several administrations now, is that if you don't like the regime that rules Iran, the best thing you could do is to open up total trade and travel with the country so that the country citizens don't have any reason to rally to the regime that rules them. It's kind of hard when you're a Cuban. It's kind of hard to say, well, is my ability to start a business, is it so lousy because of this communist philosophy, or is it
the United States? Yeah.
So you do that's the best thing you could ever give a communist dictator, is to obfuscate who's really, what's really causing the citizens' poverty. Because if we had opened up a free hand and said, we will freely trade with you, not manage trade like NAFTA and all those bogus deals, but if we had true free trade, say, look, we will have free trade with anybody in Cuba, and we will have free travel. Come on in, join, come hang out.
Exactly.
That would delegitimize the regime, and the people would say, hey, there's nobody to blame for our problems but these bad guys. Let's get these guys out of here.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they never usually get rid of the dictators in a nice way, regardless. But that's one of those quirks of human cultures that we haven't been able to figure out yet. But yeah, just even the Russian issue, I remember Russian popular opinion was very against Putin before we began sanctioning Russia and instigating the Ukrainian uprising. The Russian population was kind of souring on Putin. And so if you believe, and I'm not going to give an opinion one way or another, but if you believe that Putin needs to go, then the best way you could pursue that course of action is to open up friendship, travel, and free open trade to Russia.
Exactly. Yes. Yep.
And see, this is what's hard for people to understand. That is Christ's turning of the cheek principle, right? Because people think turning of the cheek is some kind of sweet, sentimental Hallmark card thing that Jesus said. People, the extent that people apply that principle is usually they let somebody else go in front of them at the buffet. Okay, I'll let you go ahead and get that chicken instead of me. That's about as far as we go with turning the other cheek. But if you understand turning of the cheek, it's not just about the personal bullies, but also if you find yourself in a societal conflict between nations, they're not going to bait us into an unwinnable war of nation building. Instead, we're asking everybody in the world, including the ones who are neighbors to these people right now, that there is $100 billion bounty on the heads of all the administration of Al-Qaeda and every one of the people, and anybody can bring them in. Can you imagine with that happening? Remember, the day after 9/11, 1 million Iranians were marching in solidarity. Using free trade is a form of turning the other cheek. A lot of people get scared off by that concept because they think of free trade like, you know, the managed deals like NAFTA and CAFTA, which they're called free trade, but it's usually some kind of corporatist rigged deals that are set up. But I'm talking about true, free, voluntary, not managed by government trade, where you just let people interact with commercial interests however they see fit between those countries. If we had that kind of offer to people like a Putin, you would see that the Russian population would either get Putin to correct his behavior that we don't like, or to get someone in who is a much more peaceful administrator. So that's the way you deal with violence, is you let it fall in on top of itself under its own weight. Jesus is not a pacifist. Nonviolence is a way of defeating evil. It's almost like Aikido. You ever seen Aikido? Where the samurais, they punch, you know, I mean, they take a punch and they glide that punch.
Oh, yeah.
Onto its own weight, and they let the attacker fall on his own weight just by guiding it with a finger, almost, you know.
Yeah, Ron Paul believed that way.
Yeah, that's right, and he was one of the only ones that we've had. And
yeah, what about his son?
Rand to an extent does as well, but he's not quite as forceful on that. He's kind of he tries to take more of a little bit more moderate stance, and I think that's a little bit of a missed opportunity with him.
Yeah.
You know, have we ever had the privilege? You know, a lot of the leftists talk about privilege, and I ask people, have we ever not known the privilege of living in a country that's been sanctioned by an empire? If we actually lived in a country that was sanctioned by an empire and we experienced how difficult it was to get a loaf of bread,
yeah,
you know, we haven't really experienced that, you know. No. But when there's a sanction where you cannot access goods and services that you need because there's an embargo or what have you, that's a terrible thing, because there's nothing you can do as a citizen to change it, you know.
No. And it creates animosity like we see with ISIS, you know.
Madeleine Albright said in the 90s, she said, you know, that's collateral damage, when someone asked her about the 400,000 Iraqi children that were starved to death under the Clintons. She said that's collateral damage, you know. And then she has the audacity to tell every woman in America there's a special place in hell for them if they don't support her favored candidate, you know, in this last election. What about, I'd like to ask Madeleine Albright, if she's so concerning of women, where was her concern for the Iraqi women who were starved under her watch? I guess she doesn't care.
It's like we're distant from the world's suffering.
Well, that's why I have kind of a theory about that, and maybe I'd like to ask you what you think causes that, because I have this theory that we tend to scapegoat vulgar language as a way to pass the buck for our complicity with actual violence. So it's almost like someone like a Meryl Streep has this kind of understood knowledge that, well, you know, presidents, that's what they're going to do. They're going to have wars and all kinds of messy, violent things, but I don't have to look at that. I don't have to see that. That's just going to happen out there. But if I go to dinner at a cocktail party, I certainly don't have dinner with people who make gestures that could be perceived as insulting a disabled person. I don't do that. That is not something that I would be seen at a table. So it's almost like the gesture or the words are more violent to her than actual violence.
I think it's human nature to to be self-righteous.
So that it's amazing, you know. We got a world where there's 2 billion Christians or self-professed Christians, and 2,000 years after Jesus, and we haven't figured out. You know, we're still working on how all this thing works. You know.
Well, yeah, and the you know, and the progressive Christians that claim to have a handle on what Jesus said and meant, they seem to be getting farther and farther away from where we started this conversation, getting away from the how to make peace and how to keep it.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yeah, and I think it's the same way. Like you know, their scapegoat is in the presidency now, and so now they're distracted. so they're, you know, that's how effective this, you know, the system of evil is in terms of keeping its power. Is it always finds a way to distract even the smartest or kindest-hearted people by whipping them up into frenzied outrage mobs where they just have such a psychological disposition towards anger and wrath at defeating their scapegoat, who's in the presidency at the time, that they become useless. They become useful idiots, and they become useless to the cause of peace. And unfortunately, it seems like that age-old divide and conquer. It's a Satan casting out Satan approach, right? Because you know, well, I'm not going to say as much about Obama because he wasn't Trump, see, or I'm not going to say as much about Trump because he wasn't Obama. Well, that's the answer for about, you know, almost everybody who's politically involved. They pick a team, you know. And I think this is what we should be learning about in church, don't you? But think about all the workplace laws. You know, you get fined, and if you don't pay the fine, eventually it's enforced through physical violence for all kinds of things like workplace, you know, discrimination, hiring practices, all those things. That a lot of those things are terrible, but if they're not violent, you're taking a shortcut to heaven that leads to hell by forcing people through the barrel of a gun to do something, because you're not allowing people to work out their own salvation with fear and trembling. So that's another example of when you use the sacrificial logic instead of Jesus, you get more unintended consequences rather than actually.
Well, you know, I can remember when they established into law 911. 911 addresses everywhere. And I remember my father telling me, he says, that will be the end of us, 911, because, and he said it those many years ago, that a child will call the law on their parents, and responsibility is going to be taken away from us. And it has.
Yeah. Well, you said that you have experienced a few scenarios where you had to face the law.
I've had a few run-ins with them. Maybe that'll be for another topic.
Yeah, that's what I was going to set it up for a part 2. I just want to kind of set it up as a kind of a cliffhanger, you know.